Baby, you listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week it's a mix of biking and business as I chat with Todd Barber, the owner of H5 Events. Todd is a behind-the-scenes guy, an ideator who makes action sports dreams a reality when it comes to events. Todd's career will be defined by the event he helped create, the most intense, high-risk, insane event today, the Redbull Rampage. Todd and I talk about his signature event, hooking up with Redbull the day they landed here in the US, along with how he made his way from snow to dirt. Before we get into it all, I want to ask you to tell someone about the podcast. I don't care if they're your friends or not, just tell someone. I also want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at the Powell Movement and review me wherever you listen to the show. Finally, I need to thank my great sponsors, which I hope you all support. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Todd Barber. How's things up in Whistler?
Dreamy. It's pretty awesome up here. Never a bad time in Whistler.
Are you getting work done for Rampage?
Just a whole bunch of stuff. It's Rampage, it's Proving Grounds, it's connecting with partners, it's meeting with athletes. It's always the most productive week for me, for sure. And then I try and get out and ride my bike a bunch too. Got up early this morning, did the park for a couple hours, and now I'm back cranking at it.
It's like your mini trade show?
It is. This and Sea Otter are my two biggest trade shows of the year. I don't even go to Interbike or any of that stuff anymore.
I think you've probably been at that event and Sea Otter since its inception or since you've been around.
Yeah, I've done 23 of 25 Sea Otters, and I think I've been at Crankworks the past 13 years. So, yeah, that's where I see the people, see the tribe.
We'll talk about Rampage later on in the podcast. The event that's right around the corner is the Proving Grounds. That's a qualifier for the Rampage event, and whose idea was it to come up with a qualifier?
That's been mine. It's something I've been trying to do for about 4 years, and for some reason, it was just hard to get across Redbull's plate. I don't know if they were just quite ready. They'd never done anything like this before. And they just need to make sure that it was positioned right and made sense for the Rampage brand, really, and making sure it was true to the spirit of what the event is about. And finally, after 4 years, we literally been talking about this. It's come to fruition. So I'm excited, and kind of some new people at Redbull, and they're all excited about it as well. And Rebel Media House is getting behind it, and it's just one of those events that seems to make sense, and everybody wants to see it happen, so it's good.
Are the athletes stoked on it, or is everybody behind the scenes stoked on it? Because I would think when you have an event like Rampage, there's no way to replicate the environment that you have in Utah. I mean, there is a way to do it, but it's not in Bend, Oregon, I don't believe. It's more dirt jumping and slope style aspects to an event, and then you go to Rampage, which is a totally different format, and you've had slope style guys and dirt jump guys get there and shit their pants in the past, and maybe it doesn't cheapen it, but it makes it a little bit different than what you're going to expect in Utah in October.
Probably the number one question I've had over the last 6 months since I committed to doing this thing is I would never take Rampage away from Rampage and make it a slope style. We've been doing this event for 18 years, and it's my baby, it's all our babies. It's my 18-year-old son is what I always say. And it's been going on this long, and I want to keep it true. And so this event, we're building this entirely new course in Bend, Oregon, and it's working really well. And it kind of came together last fall. Carson Storch and Kyle Jamison came to me and they said, hey, we've been doing Black Sage for 2 years. We've heard you want to do a Rampage qualifier, and why don't you come out and do it on the same weekend as we're doing it? And a lot of the athletes will be there, and we can help you build it and be involved in the process. And I'm just like, perfect. And so that was the catalyst for it. And then I flew up to Bend in January and met the owner of the Oregon Dirt Park, this guy Jason, who's super into it. And he was just like, you can do whatever you want out here, and it's private property. And so we're going to build this course. Obviously it's not Rampage in Utah Hills, but I think Rampage, I want to keep Rampage. This is going to be all Rampage type features. We're doing big flat wood drops that are going to mimic big cliffs. We're going to do lots of berms and step overs and step downs and step ups. We got a little 60-foot canyon gap we recreated, and we're really like looking at the last 4 years of Rampage and taking all the best features of the event that people have created there and basically building them in a venue at Oregon Dirt Park. And it's such a cool spot. And the dirt is just amazing. And it's going to be different. But I think this is the really only way to kind of continue this sport and have an avenue where up and coming athletes can come prove themselves. And, I don't expect any of these guys to come out of this event or girl and really do super good at the event, but it's opening the door. It's getting them there. It's getting them in the Utah environment. It's getting their build crews. It's learning how to build. It's learning the etiquette of building and all the guys who've been doing it for years. And there's a certain way that you do it and don't do it and what you build and crossing people's lines. And it's pretty overwhelming for the first time Rampage athlete for sure. It's just a way to open the sport up, really. And that's been the goal on this thing the whole time. And I'm not trying to make Rampage in Bend, Oregon. I'm trying to make a place for big bike athletes to come throw down and have an avenue to get experience and exposure and build the sport. And it's just one more place these guys can come to. So I'm pretty excited. It seems like everybody else is excited. The athletes are in support of it. And I've got a lot of great partners that have all come on for the event, and it's coming together. It feels right. So I'm stoked.
When you say a lot of partners coming on for the event, with Redbull, one thing that's unique to them is they don't usually have tons of partners at their events. When you go to Redbull Rampage, you are left with Redbull burnt in your brain. Are you bringing in outside brands to this qualifier?
Yeah, so this event is being produced by H5 Events, my company, and then Redbull's in coordination with it and the Rampage kind of licensing the Rampage and allowing us to do the qualifier and take the athletes, the top 3 that are going to go to this. And, Redbull's really opened up more to it. With the Signature Series, they have other partners like BF Goodrich is there and Polaris Razors are there. And so they're starting to allow other partners at Rampage. And then, I've basically had to come raise the money to put this entire event on. Redbull's paying for the production side on the Red Bull Media House, but on the dollar side, I've had to go out and find people to believe in this idea and the concept. And it's been great. I've really, kind of knocked on some doors of people that I've known for a long time and not really asked really to come out and sponsor my event. So this is the time that I kind of called in all the favors and talked to everybody. And Marzocchi and CJ at 510 came on board. She was actually one of the first ones that came on and really believed in it and allowed me to know that I had a presenting sponsor. And then Marzocchi came on as the title. And GoPro and BFG and Magura came on, and Alpine Bike Parks is helping, and Raceface and Red Bull, Cliff Bar, Fast House, 10 Barrel Brewing, which is a big partner of yours. They've been great. Camelback, Smart Wool, and then Pink Bike is helping out as well.
Most people, when you ask for a list of sponsors, they don't go as deep and aren't as great at brands as who you're working with. So it sounds like by piggybacking on what Carson already has going and then bringing in some infrastructure from Red Bull and all the brands that you're working with, it's going to be one of those events that can't miss as long as the weather works out.
Yeah, I hope so. A lot of sleepless nights I'm already having on this thing because I just want it to be right, and we all want it to be right. And Carson and KJ, Kyle Jamison's the lead builder, and he's taken this so serious, and we talk every day and are texting. He's sending me pictures. I was just down there the past 3 days with him and stayed with Cam McCall at his house, and all we did was just talk about how to make this thing right, to represent the sport right, and to make sure when the athletes show up and the cameras show up that people are like, oh, I get this. This makes sense. And so that's what we're all working really hard to just make sure it represents everything and checks all the boxes and people come and the top 3 are the right top 3. And this is something we can hopefully do for the future for this event. And then also just for the sport.
This seems like a branch off of Rampage that there's the cash prize for this. I would think it's a revenue generator for all parties involved. For Red Bull and all the brands, it's a ton of exposure. You've done 18 years in Utah. Rampage could be a global event. Have there ever been talks and gone and scouted areas to see where else it's possible to hold a Rampage event?
Yeah, we have. I mean, honestly, the past 18 years, I've traveled the world and been all over the U.S. and driven all over Colorado and Utah and Idaho and gone looking in the U.S., flown up to Alaska. I scouted up there with Dave Watson years ago. And then we did the whole Gobi Desert where the trail ends.
Was for this, right?
Yeah, the original concept was we went over there, Darren Bearclough and Cam McCall and myself and Jeremy Grant from Freeride came over and scouted it, and that ended up turning into where the trail ends. I think you could definitely do one there. It's like Rampage times 4 there. Dirt is great, and it's all there, but it's just in China, in the middle of nowhere, in the Gobi Desert, so it'd be kind of hard to do. Anything's possible, so I think this event is the kind of hopefully catalyst to get some other big bike events going because there's tons of ripping athletes and We had close to 7 million people watch the live webcast last year on the Rampage. So there's definitely people who want to watch it and follow it.
Yeah, it is an incredible event. I'm going to jump into more of your life. You are not a dude who's in front of the lens very often. There's not a ton of interviews out there. There's not a lot of stuff to get about you. You were raised, I believe, in Northern California. What part?
I grew up in the Bay Area, a place called Los Altos, till about 15 years old. And then I moved to Tahoe, and I lived in Tahoe off and on for 27 years. And now I moved down to Marin County. Been living there for the past 11 years. Yeah, I don't try and draw a lot of light. I just try and do cool things, and I enjoy what I do, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in it. So I let the athletes shine and the project shine, and I just enjoy being the one putting them on.
How far are you from San Francisco? Like 30 minutes or something like that?
Yeah, I'm just north of there, about 25 minutes north of San Francisco.
Bay Area sports fan. You like the Niners and all kinds of teams that haven't done anything.
Yeah, I am. I'm a born and raised 49er Giants fan. Love the SF Giants.
It's baseball. I don't follow it because I think the sport's going to die, but they were good in that sport.
Yeah, they had 3 world titles there a couple years ago, so they're pretty fun to watch. But I'm way more into the action sports side of it. But live in the Bay Area, it's kind of in the water there. Everybody kind of follows those sports.
And in the water there, too, when you're growing up, is the Grateful Dead. Are you a Deadhead kid growing up, or what kind of things are you into?
Yeah, I love music. I'm definitely actually quite a Deadhead. Still go see the Dead in its current forms, and saw, I think, close to 70 shows back in the day. So I was pretty into the Dead and still am. But I love all music. Anything from the Queens of the Stone Age to the Dead to you name it, jazz. And music's a big thing. I go see music a lot in the city, and it's another one of my passions.
Did you ever eat one of those little square pieces of paper that you could get at the Dead shows?
No, I wouldn't do that.
If you went to 70, I would hope you did it more than once. Have you ever sold things at shows?
No, not really. Just love to go with friends. And I went to school at University of Colorado at CU, so had a lot of friends, and we'd always travel out and go see the shows. So it's always kind of more of a social thing.
Did you cry when Jerry died?
Shed a tear. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, saw him 70 times, so he's a pretty big part of my life there for a while.
Sport-wise, skiing and snowboarding, do you get into that growing up because you're in the mountains or near the mountains?
Yep, grew up ski racing, so that was my passion for sure as a kid, and then kind of got burnt from ski racing and got into snowboarding. Did a lot of that, competed in some border crosses, and that was kind of my life. I was really into snowboarding for a long time. That's probably my second passion to mountain biking. I was lucky enough this year, went to Italic in the summer last year and rode bikes. Then I came back this year for my birthday in February and went up there and did some backcountry skiing up there, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure your life isn't that bad of a life, and going to Italic 2 different times a year is a pretty nice way to live.
Yeah.
College-wise, you go to University of Colorado. You study environmental conservation. Were you just recycling and doing things that people weren't doing a long time before people were doing it?
Not so much. I was kind of more into just the environmental study side of it. I graduated, went and traveled through Southeast Asia for 5.5 months and went to Nepal and India, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and just kind of backpacked around with a buddy of mine for a long time. And then I came back and worked for a nonprofit called the American Himalayan Foundation, which basically funds projects over in the Southeast Asia area. Did a few events for them. Actually, one with the Dali Lama, of all things, and got to meet him. And that's actually where I caught my bug for putting on events. And then put that on for a couple of years. And then I moved to Tahoe again. Met this guy, Aaron Martin, who used to put on this thing called the Tahoe Fat Terror Festival, which was the first event that Redbull ever sponsored in the U.S.
That was a big deal back then.
Oh, it was huge. Yeah. It's up in Tahoe. I think it went on for close to 10 years. I was involved with it for about 3. That's where I got into putting on mountain bike events. And the rest is history from them. That was in 1996. And that's when we met Redbull and did their first event in the U.S. And I've done over 100 of them since then.
How do you meet up with Redbull? They sound so mysterious there, but how do you meet with people from there? Do you cold call them? Do you meet them at an event? How does it happen?
Pretty funny thing the way it happened. The year prior, I was actually working for a company called GGP. We were putting on ski events in Park City. It was called the Sprint Bumps and Jumps. And I met one of the Austrian national aerialists. It was sponsored by Redbull. I'd never heard of it. And this is in like 1995 or 96. And he had a Redbull helmet on. And I was like, what is that? And he gave me a can of it when we were actually driving the truck back to Squaw for another event. And drinking those, we're driving across the country. And I was like, this is the best stuff ever. What is this stuff? And then didn't really think much about it. But then I went to Sea Otter that spring, and I was there with my buddy Aaron, who's since passed away. But the two of us are there sleeping in a Subaru and being dirtbags trying to put this event on and trying to figure out how to pay for it. And this guy's walking down the row and he's got a case of Redbull in his hand. I'm like, Redbull, I had some of that stuff at this event. This stuff's amazing. They're like, we just landed from Austria. We're here to start Redbull in America. And literally they had a case of Redbull. And we said, well, we're putting on an event in Tahoe. And they said, well, our test markets are Tahoe and Santa Cruz. So this would be perfect. And after that, we put that big event on for them and did a thing called Ultra Cross, which we did for 6 years. I did 13 Flugtags from 2 air races, King of the Rock, endless film projects around the world from Nepal to China to Mexico, Rebel Recon. Yeah, just been a great, solid client ever since then.
So Red Bull, they've defined your life and working career. I think if you look at your career on paper in terms of whatever's you've had to submit, 80% of them are through Red Bull, I would think.
Absolutely. I mean, I was there from the start when there was 7 people working down in LA to where they are today, and just continue to come up with projects, and they come to me with projects, and it's been a pretty great partnership. They've just been a really great brand that's supported the scene and all the passionate things that I like to do, and come to them with all sorts of ideas and projects over the years, and they've pretty much jumped on all of them.
It's awesome when they jump on everything that you want them to do. One thing we haven't talked about is how'd you get into biking? You said a passion was snowboarding. It was skiing first, and then you got burnout, got into snowboarding. When does bikes come into the equation? What year, and when does it start getting serious for you?
It's funny. I started pretty late. I really was a skier and did a little bit of biking in college. I was pretty into it, but I don't think it was until really when I graduated college and lived in Tahoe and started doing the Tahoe Fat Tire Festival in like 96 is probably when I really started getting into it. And then I moved down to Marin about 10 years ago and do a ton of bike riding. So I ride 3-4 days a week and got a big crew of guys. We do night rides and shuttles and all sorts of fun stuff. So mid-90s is when I got into biking. Never really competed too much. I've done the Downeyville race. I've competed in that 5 times, which is a 2-day enduro, and love it now. That's all I think about.
When you were coming up, was it one of those things where all you thought about was skiing or snowboarding, and you kind of got into work where you're biking and that becomes your passion because it starts as work, and then you realize, whoa, I can do this anywhere and it's really fun?
Well, I mean, it really started with the Rampage in 2001 when I was certainly into biking at that time, but way more into skiing. And the whole catalyst for how the Rampage started was at a ski event in Squaw Valley with the Redbull guys. It was called Ultra Cross. We were there for the week and just started talking about big mountain skiing and all the ski comps out there. And that's when the idea sparked for Rampage. And we started saying, well, why can't we do this on a bike? And, that's really when I kind of fell into the whole freeride scene and starting to work with these guys. So that was back in 2001.
Now it is time for me to take a quick sponsor break. My first sponsor is Evo. And if you haven't been to Evo stores in Seattle, Portland, Denver, or Whistler, or visited their website, evo.com, you are missing out on the best deals in action sports and beyond. Evo has something for everyone in the family, and they always have a great sale going on. They carry all the best brands in bike, surf, skate, wake, ski, and snowboard, and have all the clothing and outerwear you'll need for your adventure or just to look great when it's time to head back to school or the bar. Right now, you can find some great end-of-season deals on bikes and surfboards, and check out all the new ski and snowboarding gear that's hitting the floor daily over at Evo. Evo offers free shipping on orders over $50, a low price guarantee, and a no-hassle return policy. Please support the show by buying everything you need from Evo. My next sponsor is Stanley, another iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating that green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that and a lot more these days. They still are all about adventure. They still are all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created, and they have always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you are still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change for the environment. And now I'm making it easier than ever to do that. You can save 30% on all Stanley products when you head on over to stanley-pmi.com, buy some stuff. When you check out, enter the code POWEL, the number 30, that's all one word, and you're done. I should also mention that when you buy from Stanley, you are also supporting cool projects like this podcast and the new movie from Matchsticks Productions. Those are my sponsors. Now we will jump back into the podcast. With the freeride scene, Red Bull makes the introduction to Derek Westerland, who's freeride entertainment, and at that point, New World Disorder is the shit in biking. Through Derek, you establish a friendship, but also a relationship where he can introduce you to athletes, and he's the dude making the movies that are changing the culture of the sport.
For sure, but before I met him, we were working on it, Rampage, and we were actually working with another production company, and they bailed out on us. And we were really close to the event going on, and it was actually at Interbike, and someone's like, you got to meet Derek. So we met at Interbike and started talking about Rampage. He's like, I'm into it. Let's do it. And it happened overnight. And then for the past 18 years, we've been working together and done trips all around the world together. And yeah, I kind of have done the event side and putting on the production of the event side. And he's always been the film side. And I've helped out like the Hell Barge in New World December 10. We did all the production on the Hell Barge, and he came out and filmed it, and then Where the Trail Ends and the Gobi Desert stuff, and Redbull Recon. We went down in Baja in 2005 with all the Rampage athletes. So we've just been kind of hand in hand doing projects together. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a great relationship working with Derek. He's been a good friend for a long time. So always fun to work with the freeride guys.
When you come up with the idea, you're with Red Bull and you're at an event saying, why can't we do this on bikes? You bring in Derek, I would think, into the conversation. You bring in another company, they don't work out. Derek gets in the conversation. I feel like Bender's involved in this somehow, but is he involved early on or does that come later?
So yeah, kind of backing it up. At that ski race, there was a guy who worked for Red Bull, and his name's Paul Crandall. He was the VP of marketing at the time for Red Bull. We'd already been working with Red Bull since 96. This is 2001, so 5 years. And we were talking about this idea, and him and I and a couple other guys, a guy named John Paradine and Ben Warner, who used to work for Bike. So we all sat around and kind of threw the idea around, just basically, why can't we do Big Mountain on a mountain bike? And then actually I went up to Cordova, Alaska that winter to go ski up at Points North, Kevin Quinn's place. And we were all talking about it more. And there was a bike magazine sitting on one of the tables. And it was a picture of Josh Bender doing that big Park City drop he did off that kind of shoulder off the road where he kind of splatted pretty hard. But he was on the cover, and we're like, well, God, if anybody knows about what's going on in the big mountain stuff, and if we're going to do this, let's call this guy. So tracked him down, got his number, called him up, and he's like, yeah, I'm living in Virgin, come on out. And then he ended up going out there the first time Paul went out there, and he took him to like the Hanksville, Caneville area. And it was just kind of all what we call mini golf. There was like one or two drops, but nothing that was long. The vision was to find something like Alaska where there's big, long ridges. So the first scout didn't go all that well, and we were kind of frustrated what we're going to find. And he's like, well, we should just go look behind the hills in Virgin here. I mean, Freeride had shot there. I think they did New World Disorder too. They'd shot Watson and Chandra there doing some stuff. So we just drove out there, and literally when we drove out there, I'm like, dude, why didn't you show me this the first time? Like, this is what we're looking for. And it basically looked like Alaska made out of dirt. And that's what really sparked it in 2001. We kind of threw it together and begged all the athletes, and everybody's like, what is this? What are you doing? And, calling all the team managers and just begging people to come. And we pulled together a kind of ragtag group of guys. And that first year was super raw and super basic. But when it was over and we all kind of stood there, it was like, wow, that was pretty rad. And you didn't know I'd be going on for 18 years, honestly, but we definitely knew that it was something that we had there, and it was going to be replicated. And we were going to do it again next year, and it's just built every year. So it's pretty wild to see where it started and where we are today. It's been a crazy trip.
In my opinion, it's the best event in action sports. For those that don't know about this event, they've never seen it, they weren't one of those 7 million people that watched on the internet, it's something that captures and defines, I guess, the spirit of progression more than anything, especially when it started back then and helped change the sport. But how would you describe to my grandmother what is the Red Bull Rampage?
Whew. I mean, most grandmothers know about it these days. It's pretty crazy. But it is really a very unique event because it's really built by the athletes. So it's not like any other event where you got a big ski race where everybody's racing the same course, or a moto, or even surf. I mean, it's just like, it's kind of standard what's going on there. Like anybody who comes to Rampage, and since 2001 to now, it's been this slow progression by the athletes, the technology of the bikes, by the builders. I mean, the builders have had a huge impact on the sport in the last 6-7 years, and the techniques of the athletes coming out with their build crew and how they build. It's one athlete and two builders, and that's all they're allowed. Can't use any power tools. You have to use all hand tools. The event's actually kind of cool. It's progressed in the last 2 years, and I think the safety, everybody thinks that we're getting lucky the past 2 years and people aren't getting hurt anymore, but it's really the biggest progression of what we've been doing is this water system that we've built now. On the hill, we have water across top to bottom on the mountain now that's hoses, and we've got cisterns all over the mountain, and it was developed by Dave Smootalk, who's helped us kind of put this thing together. And we have this high power pump that pumps water up, and it really allows the athletes to shape and build and pack and make lips that are consistent and landings that are consistent. It's really kind of been the game changer, I'd say, in the past 2 years.
Well, Todd, you didn't really explain for my grandmother what Rampage is at all. I would tell my grandmother they put all the best bikers in the world on top of a crazy mountain and they say go. And they have been lucky. Yes, they have a new water filtration pump system, which allows for harder landings and allows for a lot more convenience for the diggers. But at the end of the day, it's the most challenging terrain that any of these guys will see all year long in a contest format. And it's pretty crazy. Like you say, you haven't had injuries the past couple of years, but I would think when you're prepping for it every year, there's always a plan for when something happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it all from 2001 to this. And, obviously we've had some injuries, knock on wood, and it's something I don't really like to talk about too much.
But it's part of the game. I mean, it's a reality that the athletes experience, that you experience. It's just part of life in those sports.
It is. And we've worked really hard to make sure they've got the safety net they need so they can come. They don't have to think about if they get injured, who's going to be there. We've got that covered. I mean, I have close to 50 medical personnel on site for this event, which people are like, what, 50 people? I mean, we have 25 on hill, like in every single corner, there are medical, so people can be there right there. We've got a 4-person high angle team with ropes that we set up a series of ropes in all the cliffs. So if anything happens, we got guys rappelling down into it. We've got a helicopter on site. We've got 2 ambulances. We have a 6-wheel ATV. And then we've got a whole Redbull physio team that's there doing physio work on these guys leading up to it, making sure that they're all as loose as they can be. And we just really try and let them push the sport where they want to push it, as far as they want to push it. And I think that's the unique, beautiful thing about this event is it's really up to the athlete to take it where they want to. And I think that's what separates it. And that's why I think this event has lasted 18 years, because it's not the same thing every year. And every year I think we've hit the glass roof, and then every year it gets blown off again. And I never see it coming or what it's going to be, but every year there's something new. And you're just like, oh my God, they did it again. It's mind blowing. You're like what Adolf Silva did last year, or what Reeder did, or what Andreo did, or Tom Van Steenbergen's huge backflip. I mean, it was just, you were there last year. Your jaw is just on the ground. And if you haven't seen it live, you have to come to Rampage at some point. I know tickets sell out quick, but if you are into action sports or into seeing something that's just pretty unbelievable, you have to come to Rampage. It's a mind-blowing experience. And it never ceases to amaze me or anybody who goes there, everybody every year. At the end of the day, they're just like shaking their head going, oh my God, I cannot believe it just went down again. It's a cool thing to see.
So the first 4 years of the contest go off, I won't say without a hitch, I'm sure there are hitches, but your job is to make sure no one notices them and make sure the event goes off smoothly. Then you guys go on hiatus. What's the reason for the break at first? Is it the site has gotten stale, or is it danger? What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, I don't know. At the time, it was still so new every year, and we only had that one venue, and it was so hard to get that venue too. Another unsung hero is this woman named Simran Chacon, and she worked for the BLM, and she was like kind of a visionary, and without her help, there's no way this event would have ever happened, or Rampage would happen. So like she basically helped us get the permits to build there. So after 4 years, it was pretty dug out and pretty built out. And I don't know, it just felt like the right thing to just take some time off. We did some other things. We did a trip down to Baja called the Redbull Recon with all the top 10 guys. And we went down there and got a boat. And it was a pretty cool trip. And we actually thought that maybe be a new Rampage site. It didn't really work out. The terrain was super rocky. And then it just kind of went on hold. And I can't say that we didn't try and find new places, but it just didn't make sense to find something else. And then in '08, we just started really kind of hitting it again. And I was searching Google Earth and I had maps. And then in '08, Darren Bearclaw and myself, I put together like 12 locations all the way from Salt Lake City all the way down to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we drove over like a 10-day period and just went and saw all these different locations. Drove down every side back road in all the deserts from Salt Lake all the way down there. And then we went back to the Rampage site, ended up going on Gooseberry Mesa to kind of get like a bird's eye view of the whole area. And we noticed there was a road back there, and there was this incredible mesa, which became the '08 site. We went back there, and it was just a Jeep road, literally really hard to get in there, kind of more of like an ATV track. And the second we got there, and Bearclaw looked up, and he's like, dude, this is it. And that's when the '08 one started, and that's what we called the evolution. That's when we brought in the whole wood feature thing, which we kind of felt like was the next progression of it. It made sense in '08 to do the ramps. The building really wasn't there yet, and all the athletes didn't really have like dig crews. So we thought was, well, hey, we'll build some of this bigger stuff because the slopestyle was kind of coming into the sport, and jumping and tricks were coming into the sport. And so that's what we built. All the wood ramps were there for those 4 years.
Does that make it safer too when you can kind of channel where riders are going to go? You're like, we know they're either going to hit this feature or this feature, because if they don't, they're not going to really have a great judged line. Do you think anything like that? Or is it just like, hey, we're doing a lot of shit like this in slopestyle. It'll get those riders that wouldn't think they could ride a burly, gnarly line. It'll make them think they can do this now because its features they're used to.
It was more that we felt like the athletes didn't have enough time to build something of that scale, which they really didn't. We didn't really have dig crews in '08, and they didn't really have that. It's a lot different than it is now. So we figured we'll build 4 to 5 big features across the mountain that people can use, and they can figure out how they want to get to those features, but they'll have some big features to hit. And that's when the Icon Center, the Oakley Icon Center came together, which was a pretty cool time putting that together. And then, we kind of figured in 2015, the build crews had come to a part where they could build almost everything they needed. And that's when we just decided that was last year of the ramps. And I think that was a good choice, but up to that point, it made sense. And then after 15, it didn't make sense. So we didn't do it anymore.
Do you hear shit from the riders? Do people get pissed off when there's stuff built? And I'm sure you hear both sides of the coin. Some people are stoked, some people aren't. And do you hear that personally?
Oh, I hear it all the time. I'm the human punching bag. I get it from all ends, but I've just learned to just take it and trying to listen to as many voices as possible, whether they're positive or negative, and then just try and steer the ship in the direction that we can steer it that makes sense, and every year is not the same. And I think that's why this event has survived as well, as we've been willing to recreate it when we've had to recreate it. We've had our ups and downs. In 2015, we had some kind of upheaval from the athletes, and they weren't stoked on some of the rules and stuff. So we basically tore the rules up and the judging up and the prize purse up and how we were going to build it. We started all over, and 2016 was entirely new. And it seemed like it kind of righted the ship again. And now I'm at Whistler, and the main reason I'm here is we're doing a Rampage athlete meeting tomorrow morning, and invited everybody to come out for breakfast, and we're going to sit around and just see what's on people's minds and see what the futures needs to go, and make sure we're prepared for this year, and they're coming in and expecting what they're expecting, and give them the resources to be successful.
You brought up 2015 and riders being pissed off. There was a lot of injuries that year. The worst of all, I think, being Paul Bass, and he ends up getting paralyzed, and that's terrible, but that is something that happens in these sports. But when I look at it all, I kind of look at prize money, and this is one of those events where riders are putting their lives on the line every year. In the first year, $8,000 prize money, who cares what it is? It's a visionary event. Riders want to be a part of it. And when they leave that event, they're blown away with what happened there. Over the years, you need the prize money to increase, and sure has increased. What's the prize money this year for the Rampage winner?
I can't really speak to that. I actually don't like speaking about it. I think if people want to talk about that, they can talk to the athletes. I know that I've worked really hard, and Redbull's obviously put up considerable money. And this year's prize purse will be the biggest prize purse, I believe, in mountain bike history. Redbull's adding to it this year. So I would say if you want to inquire with them, I'll let them kind of speak to that.
But if I were to win, and I wouldn't win anything, but say I would win, would I walk with 75 grand? I mean, it's something I could probably do a search on the internet, but I think it was like a $200,000 prize purse last year. The one thing with Red Bull is when they have their own events that they're so amazing, they don't allow for other sponsors to come in and really put other money in that I've seen in the past that can really pump up the prize money. So where Rampage might cost a couple $1,000,000 to put on, if they could get that extra 500 grand to put into the prize money, then it's worth risking your life, I feel like. Then it's like, hey, this is what I'm best at in life. You know, if you can walk with 300 grand, you know what? You are going to send it at that. And if something happens, that's part of the game. But when you're only going to be able to win a little bit of money that'll cover all your copays and some insurance if you do get hurt, that's the questionable thing about it.
Yeah.
The event itself is amazing.
Yeah, and it's a healthy prize purse. And we've also upped our appearance fee. So each one of the athletes get a nice little check to just show up and get their build crew there and get their hotels and their flights. And I feel like we're at a pretty good spot and the athletes are happy with that. And it's a pretty good purse the winner takes away from Rampage. Again, I'm not really free to kind of speak about that. And I'd prefer not to. It is big. I wish it was 3 times this. I wish it was what the Moto guys, and I wish we could give $1 million away at this. But Redbull's doing this to support the scene, but they're also an energy drink company and they're not making money on the event. It's a promotional thing they're doing. So it's a fine line and it's an expensive event to put on and to produce and do right. So I think everybody's doing the best they can. And I think all the athletes hopefully understand that. And it seems to be at a good spot. And that's why we're doing this meeting tomorrow, is to kind of talk through more of it and just make sure we're all on the same page going into the event.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
In your career in 2007, you end up creating High Five events or H5 events. I think you were part of global event management before that in the early 2000s. And then you guys went your own ways.
I had 2 other partners that were majority partners in global event management. And I was kind of a minor partner of it. And at the time, we had been working together for 10 years and events are pretty intense. And I think we just had different goals we wanted out of it and different kind of projects we wanted to do. So at that point, I just decided to do my own business and then start H5. And it's been solid since the day I started. So it's worked really well and got great clients and put on big projects and I've made a pretty good living just following my passions and putting on rad events and cool film projects. And I've worked with quite a bit of film production as well. Worked with TGR for the past few years, producing a show called Locals, where Cam McCall was the host and Mike Hatchett was the director.
Legendary dudes.
Legendary dudes, for sure. And we traveled around the U.S., basically action sports stars in their hometowns and documented where they live. And if we went to Moab or Mammoth or Florida, we did kiteboarding, snowboarding, surfing, climbing. It was a really cool show. I did that the past 3 years, did 16 of those things.
I was aware of those. I interviewed Cam. But the one thing I just never understand with outside TV is they have great content, but it seems like they have trouble telling people about it for some reason. Did you ever notice that?
Absolutely. It's crazy. I mean, it was a really cool show. I felt very proud of it. And I know all of us who worked on it were very proud of it. And the athletes were stoked on it. But it's near impossible to find. You can't find it online. You know, it's the only place you ever see it's like on a local ski channel. They'll usually play a lot of it, but it's hard to find.
Now it is time for my final set of sponsors, and I'm going to start with Spy Optic. Spy has spent the past 25 years innovating the sunglass game, but more importantly, they've spent 25 years making you look good. To celebrate this 25th anniversary, Spy is re-releasing the MC3, an ode to Jeremy McGrath's original MC sunglass. The new Dirty Mo 2 is a sick update to Dale Jr.'s original Dirty Mo, and the Scoop 2 celebrates Spy's OG Scoop sunglasses, which started it all. If you wear sunglasses and listen to this podcast, it's time to support me, save some money, and make yourself look good. What I want you to do is head on over to spyoptic.com, pick out some sunglasses, head on over to checkout, and you are going to save 20% by entering the code POWEL20, that's all one word and the number 20, and you'll save 20% off. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing my favorite Northwest beer since 2006. And since they started brewing beer, they've been supporting the sports we love. If you aren't sure about what they've done in action sports, well, I'll tell you. They are the first beer brand to produce their own ski and snowboard movie. They support a team of A-list athletes. They throw a series of hella big air events. They have signature beers that donate to causes like Protect Our Winners. And they are supporting the big Proving Grounds Rampage qualifier in Bend this September. If all of that isn't cool enough, the people that work at 10 Barrel, they're all skiers, snowboarders, and bikers. And if you want to find out a lot more about the company and what goes on behind the scenes, well, they have their own podcast, Fully Aligned. and it's available wherever you get your podcasts. It'll make you think a lot more about what you drink. Next time you head to the store, make sure you buy the beer that supports action sports. Pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel. Those are my sponsors, and now we will jump back into the podcast. You got the company started. You launched with another Rampage event, which is pretty nice. You know you've got a check coming in with your Redbull relationship. You also do some experiential marketing things, which I think has become the norm today of thinking out of the box and doing crazy stuff. Not as much in 2010. One of the first things you did was the brainchild of Derek and New World Disorder crew with their Hell Barge, and you pretty much created a dirt jump setup on a barge out in the San Francisco Bay, right?
Yeah, that was a crazy project. It actually came out of a tour called the Stumps, Clumps, and Jumps Tour, which was kind of a co-branded Kona Bikes and Red Bull road trip that we did with like Andreu and Paul Bass, and Semenuk was on there. And we were supposed to go down to do a triple backflip that Andreu was going to try and do down this compound that Red Bull had down in Southern California, which was like a moto compound, the big foam pit. And then about 3 weeks before we were supposed to go down there and do that, the foam pit caught on fire and they shut the whole thing down. And so Derek and I jumped on the phone and like, what are we going to do now? And he's like, well, I've always wanted to do this Hell Barge thing. And I had put on a flug tog in San Francisco, the Red Bull flug togs, and we'd used a big barge for that. So I called that barge company and they said, yeah, we've got a 270 foot long rock barge if you want to use that. That whole thing came together in 3 weeks. And actually I was in Whistler at Crankworks working 24/7 on it. And then we had a branded RV and we headed down north and built that massive thing and ended up just being insane. We got great weather and it was a pretty cool project.
That's the kind of job that pays off when you can turn around in 3 weeks and create something on a barge like that, where it's like, look, we have this hole that we need to fill, and here's the idea. Nobody's going to be able to get a barge like that, most people think, in that kind of time. And you're able to problem solve and make that all happen. It's got to make future jobs for you a lot easier when you can sell yourself with that.
It was. Actually, that was a pretty big win for sure. And that got on SportsCenter top 10 plays of the week, which kind of catapulted a lot of different things that went on during that. And I call it the Barg Trilogy. So I did the Hell Barge first, and then the following year, Red Bull wanted to do a BMX barge. And so we did a BMX barge with like Anthony Napolitan, Danny Dares, and a bunch of other guys. And we built a BMX barge down in South Florida. And we went through the Winterfest boat parade, which 1 million people come out and watch. And we had $40,000 in sound and light, just pumping stereo and disco balls, and had these guys. And we floated all the way through this like 4-mile procession through the intercoastal waters, and people just love it. I actually won an EX award for that, putting that together, which is kind of an advertising award back in the day for an experiential thing. After that was over, the next year they said, well, let's do something else. And we ended up doing a skate barge that we ended up calling the Mississippi Grind. And we built a cement skate barge in Minneapolis. And then we floated all the way down the Mississippi River over 41 days and just hit different ports all the way down the Mississippi River, all the way to New Orleans. And then we finished up doing a big party jam down there in New Orleans. And then we donated the cement park to a skate park in New Orleans. That was the Barg Trilogy.
So if you want a gnarly mountain bike event or a barge event, you were the guy to call.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, no 2 days of my life have ever been the same. It's always something new, and it's awesome, and it's also pretty stressful.
Well, you make it more stressful by a lot of the things you pick up. I think around 2010, you become president of the Freeride Mountain Bike Association, which produces the FMB World Tour. And I would think the idea here is just to have an organization be able to work with the events and have a full season planned out for the athletes in an organized fashion. Is that what you're thinking there?
Yeah. So it was with Tarek Razuli, who has Resolution, who's been a great friend of mine for many years as well. He's in Munich. He's putting on all these events. I'm putting all these events on and doing Rampage. And it just seemed like there was no order to the sport. Events were getting double booked and athletes had to choose which direction to go. Nobody knew who was the best in the world. Nobody knew really how to follow or find information about these events. So it started in a very simple thing. The freeride mountain bike, the FMB, which we called it, was really just to kind of pull the whole scene together. It's changed into something a little bit different, more into kind of a slope style tour, which is what it is now. And it's exciting, and the Crankworks is part of it. And it's become a great way for athletes to track and follow, and for sponsors to know who's the best in the world. But I did that for 8 years and then stepped down as the president, just trying to do some different stuff. But it was cool. I'm proud of being able to help put that together and get it off the ground, and got a great board of directors that have kind of take it, and now it's kind of running itself now. I've kind of stepped back from that. But that's kind of why Proving Grounds is now, because I feel like kind of what the FMB did to kind of get the slope style thing going and the dirt jump thing, I feel like there's a big, massive hole in the big mountain freeride scene. There's kind of like parking lot dirt jumps to Crankworks, which is the FMB World Tour. And then from Crankworks to Rampage, there's this massive gap. And that's why I feel like Proving Grounds is going to kind of hopefully fill that gap and be a place that guys can come ride who want to ride big bikes, who want to do big jumps and want to go to Rampage and compete in events like Rampage. This is hopefully the beginning of doing something that, and I'd love to turn this into even a multi-stop tour and do something, maybe before Crankworks Rotorua. I've had ideas of maybe trying to do one down there, maybe do one in Europe, and just allow the scene to grow and athletes to get involved, and hopefully Rampage just continues on.
When you take that FMB job, is it something where you're actually having to spend a lot of time doing something, or is it like an email and a call a week?
No, so the FMB Tour is kind of the overall governing body of it. The events were already existing, and then we just would sanction them. So if somebody wanted to be a bronze, silver, or gold event or a diamond event, they would come to us and submit the course design, how big it is, how big the prize purse is, what the media outreach is, and then we would, as the board of directors, review it and figure out whether it was a diamond, gold, bronze, silver. And so then they would just basically be licensed. And we had all sorts of resources like on how to build jumps and the judges. And then we also worked on certifying judges, because that was another big gap in the sport. Most of the judges back in the day were just snowboard judges, because those were the only guys that were really doing it.
Yep.
Snowboard judges were judging mountain bike contests, which just is a bad idea. So we kind of helped certify that, and we still do clinics to educate judges.
It was a feeder system. If you were to take the FMB top 1 or 2 spots, you would get into Rampage. Was that correct back then?
It was. We did that 3 or 4 years. We had the finals of the FMB World Tour were the Rampage, and it worked and it didn't work. I think a lot of people had different opinions on it. These guys were competing in slopestyle events throughout the entire year, and then they had to come to a big mountain gnarly event. The cool story, I think it came all out of that, was how Brett Reeder got in, and he won it last year. But I remember 6 years ago when he was his first year there, and he had to go there because the FMB World Tour final was there, and he wasn't all that stoked, I would say, when he first got there. But then he certainly proved himself, and he knows how to ride a bike. There's no doubt about that. And now he is the top guy in the world, really. Him and Semenek and a couple other guys.
That's another area where you are the punching bag and you have to hear a bunch of shit. When the call is made that anybody can win a spot to Rampage, people are pissed, and when they get pissed at you.
They do, actually. But whatever. I've set myself up for it, so that's the bet I've made, so I got to line it. And I know myself, and I know my intentions are good, and I try and just want to do the best for these guys and the best for the sport. So I sleep well at night, just trying to make the best decisions, and I always lean on all sorts of good people and get information. Cam McCall's a really good friend, and he's just been a great sounding board to talk to, and Carson Storch and Kyle Jamieson, Tyler McCall, Cam Zink, Kyle Strait. I talk to those guys fairly regularly, and when new things come up, and just try and see what they want to do. What do they think about it? And try and make the best decision we can. And then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That's the way it is.
Well, part of your paycheck is to take those criticisms and complaints and make sure that everybody's not really pissed off. That's one of the things that you do. Speaking of paycheck, I'm not going to ask you what you make because you were uncomfortable talking about athlete money. And I'm sure that is something that we can't really talk about too much. But your job has to be a successful one. I think you have a wife and 2 children. Do you own a home?
I did. I just recently sold it. I do pretty well. It's kind of feast or famine.
Depends on the year and the job?
Depends on the year, the job, the projects. Sometimes they're definitely better than others. And sports marketing has changed a lot over the last 24 years. And the golden days of Redbull doing lots of projects every year, that just doesn't happen anymore. So I've had to kind of reinvent myself several times over. And that's why I've been doing some of the producing for TV commercials and do some location scouting. And I wear about 30 hats, and I'll find a new hat every day. If it's something I got to figure out how to do, I'll figure out how to do it. And I think that's how I've been successful, is just never say no to anything. I'll figure it out, or I'll talk to the right people on how to figure it out. But, I do all right. I can't say I'm killing it but I get to lead the life I do and travel the world and be a part of these amazing events with rad athletes. And that's a big payoff of it.
What kind of car do you drive?
I actually just bought a Sprinter, which I'm pretty happy about. 2 weeks ago, I just bought it. So I'm getting into the van life.
What are you going to do to it?
Just make it like a mobile production office is really my plan. So I've got a bunch of projects coming up. I'm going to be staying in it at Proving Grounds. I plan to just camp in it for the 2 weeks. And then we'll obviously go off to Rampage and I'll be using it there. And then doing another project. I guess can't really talk about it quite yet, but a kind of high profile athlete. We're doing something in Utah post Rampage. So I'll be using that for 2 weeks for that as well. I'm pretty excited to have this new van. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Put the bikes in, put the moto in, hit the road.
Are you just going to go on the road for a while? Or are you going to purchase a new house somewhere? What's your plan? Because you were in Marin County, which is a really nice place to live. And now you're in a van.
Well, I've got a house. I've got a rental house. I'll be coming and going and seeing the kids. And I got 2 awesome daughters that are just turning 14 and 17. So the big girls.
Oh, man, you're like in the shit, I would think. That age, 2 daughters.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy ages for sure. It's fun, though.
All right. Well, I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but I am going to take up more of your time. I do something called inappropriate questions. Sometimes I talk to people who want to share some stuff and go on the record. Sometimes I talk to people who don't. Sometimes I don't talk to anybody. But your 3 inappropriate questions, they're going to come from me. And I have heard that every year at Rampage, there's a betting pool. Have you ever bet on your own event?
I have. I feel fine with it because, one, I'm not a judge. I would never have any of my judges bet. They're not allowed to bet. But, it's super informal. It's something Derek put together years ago. It's just kind of a funny thing. But, the funniest thing, I've never won it. And I've never even done very good at it. I never seem to get it quite right. I always kind of go with the passionate side, then probably calculated who really wants to do it. So it's always fun.
All right. Well, I will go with question number 2. I heard that you and an unspecified production company had a helicopter confiscated by the Mexican government on a film trip to Baja. How do you get a helicopter confiscated? What did you do?
Oh, my God. That was probably the craziest thing I've ever had to deal with. Yeah, it was the Redbull Recon back in 2005. And like I said, it was after Rampage went on hiatus and we were trying to find a new zone. And so we put together this project called Redbull Recon. And it was with Derek, came down and filmed it. I did all the production and spent 6 months. Actually had Bender and his brother Dusty went down there and we flew down there. I mean, I was down there 6-8 times before we did it and found all these great places. And those guys built out a bunch of lines and some of the mountains. And then we had an 80-foot boat we rented for 10 days and went to La Paz and up to Silla Cortez. And then we flew down a helicopter from San Diego, a little Jet Ranger, and had it all logoed up. And we'd found this island called Isla San Jose off La Paz. The owner of it we met with, and he said, sure, here's a letter. You can come film on my island. It had all this like kind of Rampage-esque stuff. It was actually really cool terrain on this island. And they gave us a letter, said we could do it. And then we took the boat there and we flew the helicopter and the helicopter landed on the island. And then we're sitting there kind of getting ready to get our stuff together. And this little ponga just comes out of the distance. And we're like, what the hell is that? And it was the Federales in a ponga. And somehow they caught wind of what we're doing. And they said that we had landed on basically a national park and that we hadn't received okay from them. We're like, well, the owner said we could do it. But they said, well, the whole Silla Cortez is under this jurisdiction here, and they basically impounded our helicopter. They said that basically equated to us landing a helicopter on the top of El Capitan is what they said to us. And so I spent, while everybody was drinking tequila and riding bikes for the next 5 days, I was flying back to La Paz. And then they actually impounded our helicopter on day 4. But luckily the event had just been over. We had filmed a bunch of killer stuff and it ended up being really cool. But all the athletes went home. And then Jamie Simon from Redbull, who was the girl that the 2 of us put this whole project together, we tried to get money wired down and they held the helicopter ransom to get money wired down, and we couldn't get it done by Friday, so we had to stay through the weekend. And then on Monday we finally got the money wired and we had the heli pilot flown back down, and we got the money exchanged, got the paperwork signed, went all around La Paz, got this thing done, and by 5 o'clock we got the heli cleared and he flew the thing out of there, and Jamie and I jumped on a plane and flew home. And then for about the next 8 months, Redbull hired a lawyer and we had to basically go to court with it. And at one point, I think I got a 30-page document from the Mexican government that was all in Spanish that I couldn't read. And the Spanish Redbull lawyer just said, I'm like, well, what does this mean? He's like, just don't ever get in trouble in Mexico again. Huh. And I really don't know what I was exactly charged with, but we got the hell out of there and everything ended up working all right. It was a pretty legendary trip for sure. A lot went down. A lot of tequila was drinking.
Do you go back to Mexico anymore? I
do. I definitely keep my head down though when I'm down there.
Speaking of Derek, what is the craziest thing you've ever seen him do?
Derek Westland. Oh man, it's got to be in Vegas. I'd say back in the day when Redbull used to do these huge parties during Interbike, and I think they had Run DMC, and he'd always do his New World Disorder premieres there. And we'd always go like the 9 Steakhouse and just parties and limos and you fill in the blanks, all went down. We did that every year right before Rampage. So those are some pretty crazy days. Took a toll on all of us.
Yeah, it takes a couple years off at the end, but I'm sure they're totally worth it.
Yeah.
Final inappropriate question. Who was the sketchiest rider that you've ever seen come down the Rampage course?
Jeez, that's a good question. Might have been Jaws. We had that Russian kid who came out there. His name was Jaws, and he's a really good rider. And I think he rode a bunch of stuff in Russia that was pretty cool. But he came to Rampage and definitely was pretty sketchy. In the early years, there was a lot of sketchy stuff going down, but it seemed like everybody kept it within reason. Probably Jaws, I'd say.
And I'll finish it up with, how many Red Bulls do you drink a day? Because they have made your career. I would think you drink them. Do you get to wear the hat?
I don't drink quite as much as I used to, just because try and keep things a little bit more, I don't know, just on the healthy side. But I still drink them regularly, and at the events, they're always around. So pretty often, I'd say.
Have you had the ginger ale?
I have had ginger ale. It's really good.
I'm excited to try that. Well, you've created the best event. I feel like in action sports, there is something to hang your hat on as you're going to be remembered. Actually, you won't. The athletes will. But when someone looks into the details, it'll be you and a few other guys who help change the sport within an event that I don't know if the industry accepted at first, but now it sets the standard for what gnarly is. And all I want to see is more money go into the riders, and you want that to happen as well. Hopefully it does one day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will.
All right, man. Well,
very cool.
Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it.
So that was time with Todd Barber, and what a career that guy has had. Looking at what he did with his life, you can see that you don't need an athlete to experience what an athlete does. Todd is the perfect example of that. Yeah, he's good on a bike, but he didn't found Rampage because he was an awesome biker. He founded it because he and the other visionaries saw what was happening in other sports and knew they could do that even better on bikes. Todd's dream has paid off. Todd now has a career where he doesn't have to outperform anyone on a bike. He is in a great position of being in the back pocket of Redbull, which means that we can hope to continue to see new, out-of-the-box events from Todd and his crew. That's the podcast for this week. I want to thank you for listening, ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on, and support my great sponsors. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.